Welcome to J.R.R. Reviews, which stands for Jocelyn's Rip-Roaring Reviews, recorded in real time with my guest of the week. I'm here with J.R.R. Tolkien himself, or Dirt, as the kids call him now. He was extremely flattered that I named the podcast after him. Tune in next week when we tear J.J. Abrams' Hobbit trilogy limb from limb. Also, spoiler warning for the movie below. Have you ever thought about Mark Ruffalo playing a hot dad? Yeah, we've all been there. Have you ever thought about him being a hot dad with bipolar disorder that's struggling just to get by and just can't seem to catch a break? No? Well, let me convince you. Infinitely Polar Bear, released in 2015 and directed by Maya Forbes, is actually more important than you think. Obviously set in the 70s. I mean, just look at those clothes. Cameron and Maggie Stewart are a married interracial couple living in Boston. They have two beautiful young daughters, but not all as well. Cameron, already diagnosed with bipolar disorder, has a psychotic break from the stress of his job and is subsequently fired and hospitalized. Maggie now has to take odd jobs, and they move into a dingy apartment while Cameron is rehabilitated. Since they now live in a third-rate area, Maggie worries about their daughter's safety in schooling, so she applies to business schools. When Cameron is released from the hospital, he agrees to watch their children while she gets her MBA because her scholarship from Columbia is just too good to pass up. The kids are somewhat embarrassed to live alone with their unchecked father, though. Mania episodes cause him to act out. Cameron has been off his lithium since Maggie isn't there to check on him, and his condition worsens. Maggie graduates and returns home to this mess. Even worse, she just can't find a job in Boston. Thinking Cameron is beyond saving, she takes a job in New York City and wants to take the girls with her. However, she soon realizes this was a mistake. Motivated by his love for his daughters, Cameron gets back on his lithium, and the girls stay with him. A year later, we see the girls enrolled in private school, the family visiting each other regularly, and Cameron finally controlling his bipolar disorder. A happy ending for all. Now, it's time for our regularly scheduled bipolar break. Since this movie takes the time to lovingly and accurately handle Cameron's mental illness, I should explain what mental illness that even is. Cameron is depicted as having bipolar disorder, the word itself meaning two poles because of the extreme mood swings this disorder comes with, the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. An antiquated term is manic depression, because the two extreme states are mania and depression. When in a state of mania, the sufferer is a euphoric ball of energy. However, this hyperactivity comes at a steep price. The sufferer is also unusually irritable, unreasonable, and prone to bad decision-making because their judgment is clouded. Then, the person falls into a state of depression. This is like your regular clinical depression, sadness, hopelessness, loss of energy, but it seems more extreme to the sufferer when compared to their states of mania. They really just can't win. What even causes this disorder? Let's get fancy and look to the biopsychosocial model. Mood disorders, the umbrella that covers bipolar, have a well-established genetic link. Some fast facts. If one parent has bipolar disorder, there's a 10 to 15% chance of their child developing it. If both parents have it, the chance jumps to 30 to 40. If one twin is diagnosed, it ups the risk between 40 and 70% for the other twin. Scientists at UCLA, in a 2014 study of over 700 adults, think that it has to do with the thickness of gray matter in the brain's temporal and prefrontal regions. Neurotransmitters play a part too. Norepinephrine is overflowing during mania and absent during depression. Serotonin is also absent during depression. Dysfunction of the endocrine system might even be a cause, since hormones do affect mood so much. Bipolar does appear only after puberty begins. But don't discount environment. The neuroscience can't even begin to come into play without the right conditions. Something stressful needs to trigger the chemical imbalance. This could be anything from divorcing parents to death in the family. Another risk factor is substance abuse. We'll get to Cameron's diagnosis right now, because that is exactly what happens to him. Cameron is actually professionally diagnosed with bipolar disorder in the movie, but let's pretend he wasn't, and I'm just a genius. However, I can give him a more specific diagnosis. See, the movie is set in the 70s, when mental health terminology was quite lacking. They even used the term manic-depressive in the film, since they didn't know any better. Today, each mental illness has its own subtypes. so we can more accurately treat a specific patient. A diagnosis of bipolar 1 means that the patient has suffered at least one mania episode, followed by separate hypomania and depressive episodes. The mania can be so violent that they trigger psychotic breaks, and patients are 60 times more likely to commit suicide than other bipolar sufferers. Meanwhile, bipolar 2 sufferers have had at least one depressive episode and at least one hypomanic episode, but no manic episodes. Wait, manic and hypomanic? When did that come into play? What's the difference? Well, you see, hypomania is just a lesser form of mania. Irritability and energy are slightly elevated, but it does not interfere with daily life as severely as mania. However, this does not mean bipolar 2 is a milder disorder. In a place of mania, they tend to be depressed for much longer periods, which can interfere with their lives just as much. Based on these separate distinctions, Cameron seems to suffer from bipolar 1 specifically. First, the very plot of the movie starts with him getting fired because, during a manic episode, the stress of his job and alcohol abuse triggered a psychotic break. This would only be possible in bipolar 1. Cameron describes getting into a huge fight with his bosses because of his heightened irritability. This isn't where bipolar social impacts end, though. Needless to say, it is a strain on his family life. Right after this, we see another classical example of bipolar behavior. In the very same mania, Cameron impulsively takes his kids out of school and makes them dig for mushrooms in the forest. It's because his wife likes them, but identifying mushrooms on your own is extremely dangerous, since so many of them are poisonous. But in his mania, Cameron thinks he can do it because of his heightened self-esteem. He also runs around in a red bathing suit and insists they go swimming outside, despite it being fall. His daughter asks, "Isn't it a little cold to go swimming?" But Cameron cannot comprehend this because he can't think clearly right now. Bipolar sufferers also take a lot on their plate all at once. Their heightened energy means they want to complete goal-oriented activities. Many people with mental illnesses are smart, and Cameron is no exception. He describes impulsively enrolling in 75 courses in one semester at Harvard, which they kicked him out for. He constantly asks his neighbors if they need help. In one instance, he helped an old lady named Anne Ruth with her groceries and kept asking for more tasks until she shut her door on him. He also starts countless art and engineering projects because he thinks he can finish them and that they'll turn out great. He did finish some shelves and clean the apartment in a fit of mania, but if the fit passes, the project never gets finished during his depression. The apartment gets messy again, and his own daughters aren't too embarrassed to have people over. That's the thing about depression. The movie shows it less, but there's an extremely impactful montage where, during the summer, his daughters run around the apartment in swimsuits making food. Meanwhile, Cameron stands holding the fridge open for the entire day because he just can't get himself to move. He drinks and smokes a lot more during these periods, which is common in depressed people because they want to feel anything at all. To wrap this part up, let's look at one more example from the end of the movie, when Maggie finds out Cameron isn't taking his lithium anymore. He calls her in New York City at 5 o'clock in the morning because he spent all night making a flamenco skirt for his daughter. First, he forgot about it in the first place and had to cram to make it in the night before her talent show. Second, bipolar sufferers in mania often don't sleep. He tells her, "But I'm not tired, darling, and I don't need to take my lithium. I found periodical sips of beer throughout the day do the same thing for me." All this irresponsibility and irrationality are, again, dead ringers for bipolar disorder. It's not glamorous, but it's what Cameron has. Let's get to more of that in how accurate the movie is. In a Hollywood obsessed with mental illness as a cheap plot device to glorify acts of violence, Infinitely Polar Bear is a loving, heartwarming story. Something those fat pigs fail to understand is that mental illness actually harms the sufferer, rather than sufferer harming other people. That is only consistent in antisocial personality disorder. Cameron loses his job and somewhat embarrasses his children, but no one blames him more than he blames himself. He is never violent towards anyone. In fact, he is filled with an overwhelming amount of paternal affection, as any normal father would be. He is in a normal marriage with issues where they still love and support each other. Yes, Hollywood, Normal people with mental illnesses have families and morals too. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you with a new guest and a new movie next Tuesday.